Jealous sterile stepbrother tried to poison my wife at a family dinner after we announced her pregnancy. So we pressed charges and now he is facing jail time. I, 32M, have always been a pretty average guy in terms of my daily routine. I work at a local office supply warehouse, handling shipments and inventory. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and leaves me enough free time to enjoy weekends with my wife. She and I met through mutual friends and married last year. Our married life was uneventful in the best possible way. Peaceful nights, occasional date outings, and no major drama. That is, until we decided to share our big news with the family. A few weeks ago, we learned that my wife was pregnant. We were overjoyed. We'd been hoping for this, but it still felt surreal to know there was a new life growing inside her. We made plans to tell everyone once the doctor confirmed everything looked healthy. My father and mother were thrilled, and my wife's parents were equally excited. It was shaping up to be a celebratory time. But there was one person I worried about, my stepbrother. He joined our family when I was already an adult. My father remarried after divorcing my mother. At first, I tried to be polite and welcoming, but my stepbrother, close to my age, always carried a bitter edge. The reason became clearer when I overheard him talking to a cousin about his inability to have children. Apparently, doctors told him he was sterile. While I understood how devastating that must feel, he seemed to direct resentment toward anyone who had a chance at parenthood. In the past, I've seen him become petty when someone in the family welcomed a new baby or even announced an engagement. I thought it might just be his way of coping, though it was still unpleasant. He'd throw snide comments or find ways to overshadow good news. Despite that, I never imagined he could go beyond words and do something drastic. After all, he was family. Or at least that was what I tried to remind myself whenever his bitterness surfaced. Fast forward to a family dinner that was supposed to be the perfect moment to announce our pregnancy. My father thought it would be nice to gather everyone, immediate relatives, cousins, a few close family friends, and let my wife and me share our update in a loving environment. We arrive at my father's house, filled with excitement and a bit of nervousness. My stepbrother was there, wearing a forced smile. I tried to read his mood, but he kept to himself initially, sipping a drink and pretending not to notice the happy hum in the air. Partway through dinner, my wife and I stood up to announce her pregnancy. Applause, cheers, and emotional hugs followed. My stepbrother offered a lukewarm congratulations, his eyes darting around as if he wanted to be anywhere else. My mother tried to break the tension by saying how she couldn't wait to be a grandmother, while my father beamed with pride. I felt a moment of pity for my stepbrother. Maybe it was hard for him to watch us celebrate what he felt he could never have. I had no clue at the time that this would be the night he'd cross every boundary imaginable, all because his jealousy boiled over. We were just enjoying dessert when the real nightmare began. The dinner was winding down, and everyone seemed to be in good spirits except for my stepbrother, who hovered near the kitchen. He kept offering to help with serving or cleaning up, which was unusual, because he usually avoided chores. I chalked it up to him trying to be polite or distract himself from the conversation about the baby. Near the end of the meal, desserts and drinks were placed on the table for anyone who wanted seconds. My wife took a small slice of pie. She was cautious about what she ate because of the pregnancy, but she still wanted a little treat. I noticed my stepbrother inch closer as she set her plate down to grab some water. No one else paid much attention, probably busy chatting or gathering leftover dishes. I got up to answer a quick phone call from a coworker, stepping into the hallway so I wouldn't disturb the gathering. When I returned, my wife had just started eating her pie again. I saw my stepbrother watching her from across the room, a tense look on his face. Something about the expression gave me chills. I crossed over to ask if everything was okay, but he hurried off, pretending to tidy up near the sink. My wife took another bite and suddenly grimaced. She put her fork down and reached for her stomach, looking nauseous. Initially, I assumed maybe it was morning sickness or just an upset stomach from all the food. She excused herself and went to the bathroom, feeling increasingly sick. Alarmed, I followed her. That's when she started vomiting and complaining of severe cramps. Panic set in as I tried to recall what she had eaten. I worried about food poisoning or an allergic reaction, but this felt abrupt and intense. We decided to leave immediately and head to a nearby urgent care. My mother offered to come along, and my father looked anxious, asking how he could help. My stepbrother, however, seemed oddly fixated on the half-eaten slice of pie. My father told him to put it away or throw it out, but I noticed my stepbrother hesitated before whisking the plate into the kitchen. The whole thing fell off. At the urgent care, the doctor ran some quick tests. My wife was weak and dehydrated, but the staff helped stabilize her. We ended up at a local hospital for further observation, given that she was pregnant. A nurse asked if my wife might have ingested something toxic because her symptoms lined up with certain poisons that can cause sudden vomiting and abdominal pain. My heart pounded. Could it be that she was deliberately poisoned? The idea seemed too horrific to entertain. Then I remembered the look on my stepbrother's face, the way he lurked around the kitchen, and how he volunteered so eagerly to handle the food when he never did before. A chill ran through me. I contacted my father and asked him to set aside that slice of pie. If there was anything suspicious in it, we'd need it for testing. He replied that my stepbrother had already thrown it in the trash, but promised he'd fish it out carefully and store it in a sealed container. My wife was admitted overnight for observation. She stabilized by morning, but the doctor confirmed that based on her lab results, there were traces of substances that should never be in a dessert or any food for that matter. That's when my stomach dropped, and I realized we might be dealing with a deliberate act of harm. Once it became clear that my wife had been poisoned, the hospital reported it to the authorities. A police officer came to take our statements. I explained how the evening started off as a pregnancy announcement celebration, that everything spiraled. The police were particularly interested in who had access to the food. I told them about my stepbrother's strange behavior, how he lingered near the kitchen, and how we found him suspiciously hovering around my wife's dessert. The officer advised us to preserve any evidence of the tampered food. My father, having retrieved the pie remnants from the trash, carefully placed them in a bag, which he then handed over to the authorities. They sent the sample to a lab for testing. In the meantime, my wife needed a few more days of rest, but fortunately, the baby appeared to be unharmed. The relief I felt knowing our child was still safe was immense, but the anger I felt toward whoever had done this was growing. It didn't take long for preliminary test results to confirm that the pie had been tainted with a substance known to induce vomiting and potentially harm an unborn child. The police asked if I had any enemies or if there was anyone with a motive to hurt my wife. I immediately thought of my stepbrother's resentful attitude and how he'd once made offhand remarks about not wanting to see more babies in the family. It was dark humor at the time, but now it seemed dangerously real. The police approached my stepbrother for questioning. He denied everything, naturally, insisting that my wife must have had a sudden food allergy or some unrelated illness. But the evidence didn't lie, and there were enough inconsistencies in his story. Witnesses saw him standing right by the pie when my wife left the table. My father and mother were devastated at the possibility that he could do something so twisted. They pressed him to be honest, but he stuck to his denials, claiming he was being framed or that it was all a coincidence. As the investigation deepened, I discovered another layer of betrayal. One of my cousins mentioned that she'd overheard my stepbrother ranting privately about how unfair it was that I could have a child while he couldn't. He reportedly said something like, "They don't deserve that happiness if I can't have it." That made my blood boil. Envy is one thing, but trying to harm someone out of jealousy is monstrous. Soon, the lab results came back definitive. The type of poison matched the residue found on the pie plate. The timeline, the location, and the presence of my stepbrother at the scene all pointed in one direction. The authorities told me we had enough grounds to press charges for attempted poisoning, potentially attempted harm to an unborn child as well, depending on how the district attorney decided to proceed. It felt surreal, pressing charges against a family member. But as I looked at my recovering wife in the hospital, I realized there was no hesitation. If he could do this once, who knew what else he was capable of? I contacted a lawyer to ensure every step was handled correctly. The gravity of the situation was huge, a close relative behind bars for a crime that could have destroyed my family. Yet, I knew we couldn't just let it slide. The legal process moved faster than I expected. With clear forensic evidence, witness statements, and my stepbrother's contradictory accounts, the prosecution had a strong case. Once formal charges were filed, the police arrested him. Initially, he was granted bail, but given the severity of the allegations, his bail was set quite high. My father was torn. He felt guilty about not seeing the warning signs earlier, but also disgusted by his stepson's actions. My mother refused to speak to him, appalled that he could try to harm an innocent unborn child out of sheer jealousy. During the preliminary hearing, my wife and I testified about the events that led up to her sudden sickness and the discovery of the poison. The medical team provided documents confirming the toxic substance in her system. My father testified that my stepbrother had access to the kitchen and specifically handled the pie. Additionally, the cousin who overheard his bitter tirade about other people's pregnancies stepped forward. It painted a clear picture of motive, opportunity, and intent. My stepbrother's defense tried to argue that there was no direct proof of him placing the poison. They suggested maybe the dessert was contaminated before it even arrived at the house. But the prosecutor countered with solid evidence. Lab results indicating the substance was introduced after the pie was already served, plus witness observations that he was tinkering with utensils near my wife's plate. By the end of the hearing, the judge found enough probable cause to proceed to trial. In a last-ditch effort to dodge responsibility, my stepbrother reached out to me through a mutual family friend, begging for a deal or for me to drop charges. He swore it was a mistake or that someone else set him up. But there was no way I'd risk my wife or my unborn child's safety by giving him another chance. This was an attempted poisoning, not a petty squabble. I informed my lawyer, who made it clear that no negotiation was possible. My wife and I wanted the law to take its course. The day the verdict came down was both tense and liberating. My stepbrother was found guilty of attempted poisoning and reckless endangerment of an unborn child, though the exact sentence was still to be finalized. It seemed likely he'd spend a solid chunk of time behind bars. Shock rippled through the extended family. Many couldn't believe that jealousy could drive him to commit such a heinous act. But others revealed they had long suspected he harbored dangerous resentment, especially after hearing his bitter remarks over the years. In the aftermath, my wife and I moved away from the region, wanting a fresh start away from the memories of that horrifying night. My father supported our decision, even though it hurt him to see the family fractured. My mother shed tears but ultimately agreed that distance and safety mattered more than preserving ties with someone who nearly harmed an unborn child. Our baby arrived safe and healthy several months later, bringing a bright new chapter to our lives. Though it's a bittersweet ending, knowing my stepbrother is in prison instead of reformed or truly remorseful, I find solace in the fact that justice was served. Sometimes family ties don't protect you from malice, and the best you can do is stand firm against those who refuse to respect boundaries. For us, pressing charges was the only path forward. We protected our family, and in doing so, we found a deeper sense of unity and resolve. Now, as I hold my child in my arms, I'm thankful we stood up for ourselves and refused to let envy snuff out the joy we fought so hard to build.